A billionaire who owned nearly a third of the city of Atlanta lay helpless on the roadside after being beaten nearly to death by robbers and left there to die. What was supposed to be a survey trip through the slums he planned to demolish suddenly turned into a nightmare as not a single car stopped to help him. With death closing in, a black orphan boy riding a bicycle happened to pass by. Without hesitation, the boy helped the man who was preparing to tear down his own home. The boy had no idea that this chance encounter would reveal a cruel secret about his own identity. A truth would change the fate of both of them forever. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe so you can receive the blessings from this video. The phone rang at exactly 5 in the morning. Richard Langston, the real estate billionaire who owned nearly a third of Atlanta, was already awake. He had been staring at the ceiling of his penthouse for the past hour, watching the first light of dawn creep across the imported Italian marble. He reached for his phone without looking. "What?" "Mr. Langston, this is Victoria." Victoria Reynolds, his executive assistant of 7 years and the only employee who dared call before sunrise. "I wanted to confirm your 2 o'clock meeting with the City Council regarding the Grove Hills project." Grove Hills, 847 households standing between him and a $2 billion development. 847 families who refused his compensation offers, organized protests, talked to reporters about community and heritage as if those words meant anything against $2 billion. Richard sat up. "Cancel it, sir." "I said cancel it. Tell them I have urgent business out of town." "But the board has been preparing for weeks. The mayor himself will be—" "Victoria." His voice dropped to that quiet tone that made grown men nervous. "Did I ask for your opinion?" A pause. "No, sir." "Then cancel the meeting. I'll handle Grove Hills myself, and don't tell anyone where I'm going, especially the press." He ended the call and sat on the edge of his king-sized bed looking around at 9,000 square feet of emptiness. $35 million, featured in Architectural Digest twice, and not a single photograph on any wall, not one memento, not one piece of evidence that someone actually lived here, loved here, belonged here. Richard walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 52 floors below Atlanta was waking up. His hotels, his office buildings, his shopping centers, his and his alone. No wife, no children, no real friends. 52 years old, never married, and if he dropped dead right now, the only tears at his funeral would come from people worried about their stock options. He pushed the thought away and headed for the shower. He had work to do. By 11 o'clock, Richard was behind the wheel of his black Mercedes SUV heading south toward Grove Hills. He wanted to see the neighborhood himself without the filters of sanitized reports and staged tours. He wanted to look at what he was about to demolish. The transformation happened gradually. Gleaming downtown towers gave way to aging strip malls, then to potholed streets lined with houses that sagged under decades of neglect. Richard lowered his window and immediately grimaced. The smell of sewage and rotting garbage hit him like a slap. He raised the window quickly, his lip curling. 847 households, he muttered. $2 billion. They'll be compensated. They should be thanking me. To him, these people weren't families with histories and dreams. They were numbers on a spreadsheet, obstacles to be cleared. His GPS directed him through an old industrial zone promising to save 20 minutes. Richard turned without hesitation. The road narrowed immediately. Abandoned warehouses lined both sides, windows, broken walls covered in graffiti. Weeds pushed through cracked asphalt. Not another vehicle in sight. Then his front tire exploded. The SUV lurched violently to the right. Richard cursed and wrestled the steering wheel, bringing the vehicle to a shuddering stop on the shoulder. His heart pounded, but only from the sudden shock. A flat tire was an inconvenience, nothing more. He reached for his phone to call roadside assistance. No signal. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he stepped out of the car, squinting in the sharp, late-morning Georgia sun. The road stretched empty in both directions. Abandoned warehouses, overgrown weeds, complete silence except for the ticking of his cooling engine. Fine. He would walk until he found a signal. He would solve this problem like he solved every other problem. Well, well, well. Richard spun around. 3 men had emerged from behind the nearest warehouse. White, heavily tattooed faces that had seen too many fights and not enough mercy. The one in front carried a metal pipe, its surface stained dark. The 2 behind him held knives. Richard's first instinct was annoyance. He He straightened his spine, lifted his chin, let his eyes go cold the way they did in boardroom negotiations. "Gentlemen," his voice carried the authority of a man who commanded thousands of employees. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but I suggest you reconsider. I'm worth more than you can imagine. Harming me would be the worst mistake of your lives." The leader, a thick-necked man with a scar running from eyebrow to jaw, grinned wide. One tooth gold, the rest yellow. "You hear that, boys? We got ourselves a big shot." The other two laughed, not a pleasant sound. "I have money," Richard said, keeping his voice steady. "My wallet has about 2,000 cash. My watch is a Patek Philippe worth over 200,000 at auction. Take them. Take everything. And we pretend this never happened." He reached slowly for his wallet, projecting calm. The leader took a step closer. "You hear how he talks like he's doing us a favor." Another step. Richard noticed now how big the man was, how the pipe had dark stains that might have been rust, might have been something else. "Here's the thing, Big Shot. We don't want some of it." Another step. "We want all of it." The first crack in Richard's composure. He stepped backward, his heel catching on broken asphalt. "Now wait, let's be reasonable. I can transfer money. Any amount. Just name a figure." A transfer. The leader was close enough now that Richard could smell him. Sweat cigarettes, something metallic. "You think I'm stupid? You think I'll let you make a call so you can bring cops down on us?" "I wouldn't. Shut up." The words were quiet, almost casual, but they hit Richard like a physical blow. No one had spoken to him that way in 30 years. His legs were trembling now. He could feel it, the shameful weakness in his knees, the cold sweat breaking across his back. The two men with knives had circled around, cutting off any escape. "Please." The word came out before he could stop it, thin and pathetic. "Please, I'll give you everything. Just don't hurt me." The leader smiled. "Now that's more like it." Then he swung the pipe. It connected with Richard's right knee. The pain was beyond anything he had ever experienced, a white-hot explosion that dropped him instantly. He screamed, the sound tearing from his throat, echoing off the empty warehouses. Hands grabbed him, tore at his jacket, his pockets, his wrist. The Patek Philippe disappeared, his wallet, his phone, his keys. They ripped his Tom Ford jacket apart, looking for hidden compartments, found the emergency cash he always carried, took that too. Richard curled into a ball on the ground, whimpering. All his power, all his money, all his carefully cultivated authority, none of it mattered here. He was just meat, just a body to be stripped and discarded. "Please," he whispered, "please don't kill me. I'll do anything." The leader crouched down beside him. Richard could see his boots scuffed and dirty inches from his face. "Kill you?" The man sounded genuinely amused. "You ain't worth the bullet, but we can't have you driving off for help." Footsteps moved toward the Mercedes. Then the sounds began. Metal on metal, glass shattering, the systematic destruction of a $200,000 vehicle. "There we go," the leader said. "Now you sit tight, Big Shot. Someone will find you. Eventually." Laughter, footsteps retreating, fading, gone. Silence. Richard lay in the dirt, face pressed into gravel legs, screaming with every heartbeat. He tried to move and nearly blacked out from the pain. Slowly, agonizingly, he dragged himself toward the shade of a rotting telephone pole. Every inch was torture. By the time he reached it, tears were cutting tracks through the dirt and blood on his face. He leaned against the pole and took stock. No phone, no wallet, no ID. His Mercedes sat 30 feet away, windows smashed, tires slashed, engine destroyed. His leg was swelling visibly, the knee bent at an angle that made his stomach turn. The sun beat down without mercy. A car appeared in the distance. Richard raised his hand, tried to shout, but the vehicle sped past without slowing. Then another, and another, each one passing drivers looking straight ahead, unwilling to stop for what looked like just another piece of roadside trash. Hours crawled by. The sun began its descent, but the heat remained brutal. Richard drifted in and out of consciousness, his thoughts becoming fragmented. He thought about his penthouse, the empty rooms, the unused kitchen, the bed that was never warm. He thought about his funeral. Who would come? Business associates calculating their next moves, competitors pretending to mourn, employees updating their resumes before the service even ended. Who would actually cry? The answer was immediate and honest. No one. The sun was setting now, painting the sky red and orange. Richard's vision blurred. His tongue was thick and dry. He was dying, slowly, painfully, pathetically, and no one in the world knew where he was. No one was looking. No one would find him until it was too late. And then from somewhere far away, a sound, squeaking, metal against metal, the unmistakable rhythm of an old bicycle chain. Richard forced his eyes open. At the end of the road, silhouetted against the dying sun, a small figure was pedaling toward him. A boy, thin and small, riding a bicycle that looked ready to fall apart. Richard tried to call out, but his voice was barely a whisper. The boy kept coming, closer, closer, and for the first time since the beating, Richard felt something other than pain and despair, hope. The man lying by the roadside wasn't moving. Isaiah Williams, an 11-year-old orphan who had been surviving alone in Grove Hills for 3 years, slowed his bicycle and studied the scene carefully. His basket held the day's haul from the junkyard aluminum cans, plastic bottles, maybe $3 worth if Mr. Calder was feeling generous. Every instinct told him to keep going. Stopping for strangers on empty roads was dangerous. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that, but there was blood on the man's face, dried and dark in the fading light, and he wasn't moving at all. Isaiah heard his mother's voice in his head, clear as the day she'd spoken the words, "When you see someone hurting baby, you help them, because someday you might be the one on the ground praying someone stops." He got off his bike and approached slowly. "Mister, you okay?" The man's eyes opened, gray pale cold. They focused on Isaiah traveling over his patched clothes, his thin frame, his dark skin, and something shifted in them. Contempt. Even through the pain, even lying beaten in the dirt, the man looked at Isaiah like he was something less than human. Isaiah knew that look. He'd seen it his whole life. "Get away from me." The man's voice was rough, barely a croak. "I don't need your help. Mister, your leg looks real bad. You need a doctor. I said get away. What can the child do to help?" The man tried to push himself up, and his face went white. A groan escaped him, and he collapsed back into the dirt, breathing hard. Isaiah didn't move. The man tried again, made it a few inches this time before the pain took him, fell back gasping. Isaiah watched silently. The third attempt didn't even start. The man just lay there, staring at the darkening sky, chest heaving. The arrogance was draining from his face, replaced by something else. The look of a man with no options left. "You finished?" Isaiah asked quietly. A long pause. Then, without meeting Isaiah's eyes, "Do you have a phone?" "No, sir. We don't have one at home. But Mama Rose in my neighborhood has a landline. I can take you there." "Where's your neighborhood?" "Grove Hills, about 2 miles east." Something flickered across the man's face. Isaiah couldn't read it. "Grove Hills," he repeated, like the name meant something to him. "Yes, sir. It ain't much, but people there help each other. They'll help you too." The man laughed. It was an ugly sound, bitter and broken. "I'm sure they will." Isaiah held out his hand. "Come on, you can ride on the back of my bike." The man stared at that outstretched hand like it was something foreign, something he'd never seen before. Then slowly his own hand came up. Getting him onto the bicycle was hard. The man was heavy, and his injured leg made him clumsy with pain. Isaiah was small for his age, made smaller by years of not eating enough. But somehow they managed. Isaiah pedaled slowly, feeling the extra weight with every rotation. The man gripped his shoulders from behind, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. For a while, neither spoke. "What's your name?" the man finally asked. "Isaiah. Isaiah Williams." "How old are you?" 11, sir." "You live in Grove Hills alone?" "Yes, sir." "What about your parents?" Isaiah kept his eyes on the road, watching for potholes. "My mama passed 3 years ago." "How?" The question brought back memories Isaiah usually kept locked away. The sound of his mother's breathing getting weaker, the desperate run to the pharmacy with coins counted 3 times, the pharmacist shaking his head. "Pneumonia," he said. "She got sick, and we didn't have money for the medicine. By the time the free clinic could see her, it was too late." Behind him, silence. "I was 8, Isaiah continued. "I tried everything. Ran all over town begging for money. Went to every pharmacy, every clinic, even got down on my knees outside the hospital asking them to help her." He swallowed. "Nobody did. She died in my arms, in our little house on the bed she'd slept in her whole life during a rainstorm. I held her hand while she went." The grip on his shoulders loosened slightly. "Neighbors put together money for a coffin, cheapest one they could find. We buried her out back under the oak tree she loved." Isaiah's voice stayed steady, but his hands tightened on the handlebars. "The whole neighborhood came. She didn't have money, my mama, but she had people who loved her." "And your father?" "Never knew him." a familiar ache in his chest. Mama said he was a rich man, important and busy. She said he loved her once, but his family didn't approve. She was the wrong color from the wrong neighborhood. The bicycle creaked along the empty road, but she never said a bad word about him. Not once. Right before she died, she held my hand and told me two things. Isaiah paused, remembering. His mother's face thin and pale against the pillow, her hand so weak gripping his. She said, "Don't you hate your daddy, Isaiah. Hating someone only poisons the one doing the hating." And then she said, "Being poor in money don't mean being poor in character. You be good to people, baby, even when they ain't good to you. That's how you make your mama proud." Behind him, he heard the man's breathing change. Something caught in his throat. "She sounds like a good woman," the man said finally. His voice was different now. Thick, heavy with something Isaiah couldn't name. "She was the best. I got one picture of her from before I was born. She's standing in front of some construction site, pregnant with me, smiling so wide." Isaiah smiled himself at the memory. "She looked so happy. I keep that picture with me everywhere. It's all I got left." They crested a small hill, and Grove Hills spread out below, tin roofs catching the last light, clotheslines between houses, children playing in the dirt streets, dogs wandering free. It wasn't much to look at, but it was home. "Almost there," Isaiah said. "That's my neighborhood." The man didn't respond. Isaiah glanced over his shoulder. The man was staring at Grove Hills, but not with the disgust Isaiah had expected. His face held something more complicated, something that looked almost like pain. "Mister, you okay?" No answer. Isaiah turned back to the road and kept pedaling. Past the first houses now, neighbors looking up from their porches, watching the strange sight of a boy on a bicycle carrying a beaten white man in a torn suit. Mama Rose's house was up ahead, the one with the blue door and the wind chimes. "Don't worry," Isaiah said. "Mama Rose will help you. She helps everybody." Behind him, so quiet he almost missed it, the man spoke. Why what? Why are you helping me? You don't know who I am. You don't know what I've done." Isaiah thought about that for a moment. "Because you needed help, and I was there. That's what Mama taught me. You help people when they need it, even strangers, even when they're mean to you." He shrugged his thin shoulders. "It's just what you do." The man said nothing, but his grip on Isaiah's shoulders had changed again, still firm but gentler now, like something hard inside him had started to crack. They pulled up to Mama Rose's house, and Isaiah helped the man off the bicycle. Through the window, he could see the old woman moving around her kitchen. "She'll let you use her phone," Isaiah said. "You can call whoever you need." The man looked at him for a long moment. Really looked like he was seeing Isaiah for the first time. "Thank you," he said. The words seemed to cost him something. Isaiah nodded. "You're welcome, sir." He turned toward the blue door, ready to knock, not knowing that behind him, Richard was staring at the neighborhood he had planned to destroy, thinking for the first time in years about what kind of man he had become. The blue door opened before Isaiah could knock. "Lord have mercy." Mama Rose, the 67-year-old woman who served as grandmother to the entire neighborhood, pressed her hand to her chest. Her eyes went wide at the sight of the beaten man leaning on the boy's thin shoulders. "Child, what happened? Bring him inside, quick now." She ushered them into her small living room, sweeping newspapers off her worn couch. The house smelled of cornbread and old wood. A black rotary phone sat on a side table near the window. "Found him out by the old warehouses," Isaiah said. "He got robbed real bad. His leg needs looking at." Mama Rose was already kneeling beside the couch, examining Richard's swollen knee with surprisingly gentle hands. "This is bad. Real bad. You need a hospital, mister." "I need a phone," Richard said through clenched teeth. "My assistant can send someone." "Go on then." Mama Rose gestured toward the rotary. "Isaiah, baby, get this man some water." Richard limped to the phone and dialed Victoria's number from memory. 1 ring, 2, 3. Voicemail. He tried again. Same result. Come on," he muttered, dialing the company's emergency line. Someone picked up on the second ring. "Langston Corporation Emergency Services, how may I help you?" "This is Richard Langston. I need immediate extraction. I'm stranded in a neighborhood called Grove Hills, south of the city. Send a car and medical team now." A pause. Then a young man's voice, dripping with skepticism. "You're Richard Langston?" "Yes. I've been robbed and injured. I need help immediately." "Right. And I'm Elon Musk." A snort of laughter. "Look, buddy, I don't know who put you up to this, but prank calls to emergency lines can get you arrested." This is not a prank. I am Richard Langston, CEO of. Sure you are. Have a nice night. The line went dead. Richard stared at the receiver, then dialed again. A busy signal. He tried once more. Nothing. They blocked the number, he said, his voice hollow with disbelief. He thought about calling the police, but what would he say? He had no ID, no proof of who he was. He was just a beaten man in a torn suit, making wild claims about being a billionaire. They would laugh at him the same way that operator had. A shadow fell across the doorway. Hold on now. An old man stood at the entrance, thin and stooped, his white hair catching the fading light. Mr. William Johnson, a 70-year-old former factory worker, squinted into the dim room. His eyes found Richard, and his whole body went rigid. I know you. Richard looked up. I know that face. Mr. Johnson's voice was rising now. That's Langston. That's the son of a bitch who wants to throw us all out on the street. Mama Rose stood quickly. Now, William, let's just calm down. Calm down! The old man's face twisted with fury. You know who this man is. He's the one buying up our neighborhood. He's the reason we're all about to lose our homes. He turned and shouted into the street. Hey, everybody, you know who? Mama Rose got in her house. Richard Langston, the billionaire. He's right here. Within minutes, people began to gather. 10 at first, then 20, then more. They crowded around Mama Rose's door, their faces hard with anger. Men, women, young and old, all staring at Richard with the same expression of barely contained rage. What the hell is he doing here? A woman in a faded dress pushed to the front. You come to see how the other half lives before you bulldoze our homes. Get him out, someone else shouted. Throw him out in the street. Let him rot like he wants us to rot. Richard tried to stand, but his leg buckled. He grabbed the arm of the couch, his face pale. These people wanted to hurt him. He could see it in their eyes, and for the first time he understood that he had no power here. No money to buy his way out. No lawyers to protect him. No security guards. Nothing. Mr. Johnson pushed into the room, jabbing a finger at Richard's chest. You know why I hate you. 15 years ago, your company bought the factory where I worked. 600 people employed there. Good jobs. Decent wages. His voice cracked. You shut it down in 3 months. Moved everything overseas. Said it wasn't profitable enough. Richard said nothing. My wife got sick that same year. Cancer. No job meant no insurance. I watched her die because I couldn't afford her treatment. Tears were streaming down the old man's weathered cheeks. And you probably made $1 million closing that factory. Didn't lose a minute of sleep over the lives you destroyed. The crowd pressed closer. Richard could feel their hatred like a physical force. Please, he heard himself say. I just need to get out of here. I'll leave and never come back. Leave! A man in the crowd laughed bitterly. Storm's coming. Didn't you hear tropical storms' outer bands are already here? Landfalls overnight. Roads are starting to flood. You ain't going nowhere. As if to confirm his words, the sky opened up. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the dirt roads to mud in seconds. Thunder rolled across the neighborhood. Well, ain't that something, Mr. Johnson said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Looks like the rich man is stuck with us poor folks. He can sleep in the street, someone shouted. Same place he wants to put us. Let the rain wash him away. Mama Rose raised her hands. Now, hold on, all of you. I don't like this man any more than you do. What he's done, what he's trying to do to our community, it's wrong. But I am a woman of faith. And my faith tells me we don't leave a hurt man to die, no matter who he is. Then you take him in, Mr. Johnson snapped, because I sure as hell won't. None of us will. Mama Rose hesitated. Her small house was already crowded. Her own grandchildren were visiting. There was no room. The crowd waited, rain pouring down around them. Richard stood alone, injured, despised, with nowhere to go. And then a small voice cut through the noise. He can stay with me. Everyone turned. Isaiah stood in the doorway, soaking wet, his thin frame barely visible against the darkness outside. What did you say? Mr. Johnson stared at the boy. I said he can stay with me, at my place. Isaiah, are you out of your mind? A woman who lived 3 houses down stepped forward. That man is your enemy. He wants to tear down your home. He's still hurt, Isaiah said quietly. And it's still raining. Mr. Johnson grabbed the boy's arm. Listen to me, child. This man right here, he's the reason people like us suffer. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about any of us. We're just dirt under his shoes. You understand that? Isaiah didn't pull away. He looked up at the old man with those steady, serious eyes. I understand, Mr. Johnson. I know what he's done. I know what he wants to do." "Then why—" The old man's voice broke. "Why would you help him?" "Because my mama taught me something before she died." Isaiah's voice was small but firm. "She said, don't ever leave someone to die if you can help them. She said that's how you lose your soul. And I'm not going to lose my soul over him." He looked at Richard, then back at the crowd. "He's mean, and he probably hates us. But if I leave him in the rain because he's my enemy, then I'm no better than he is." Silence fell over the crowd. The rain continued to pour. No one moved. Finally, Mr. Johnson released Isaiah's arm. He shook his head slowly, something like wonder in his old eyes. "You're just like your mother," he said softly. "God rest her soul." He turned and walked away into the rain. One by one, the others followed until only Mama Rose and Isaiah remained. "You sure about this, baby?" Mama Rose asked. Isaiah nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She sighed, then reached into her pocket and pressed a few crumpled bills into his hand. "For a taxi tomorrow if he needs one. Lord knows he doesn't deserve your kindness, but your mama would be proud." Isaiah helped Richard to his feet. The man was heavy, and Isaiah strained under the weight as they walked into the storm. The rain soaked them both within seconds. Isaiah's home was barely 50 yards away, but it felt like miles. When they finally reached it, Richard stopped and stared. It wasn't a house. It was a shack. Sheets of rusted tin leaned against each other, held together with rope and prayers. No windows, just gaps covered with plastic. The door was a piece of plywood propped against the entrance. "This is where you live." Richard's voice was barely audible over the rain. "Yes, sir." Isaiah pushed aside the plywood door. "Come in. It's not much, but it's dry, mostly." Richard ducked inside. The space was maybe 150 square feet, dirt floor, a single mattress in the corner covered with a thin blanket, a bucket in the middle of the room already catching drops from a leak in the roof. A wooden crate served as a table with a candle stub and a box of matches on top. This was the worst place Richard had ever set foot in. This was also the only place that would take him tonight. Isaiah lit the candle and soft light filled the tiny space. "You can have the bed," he said. "I'll sleep on the floor." Richard looked at the boy, 11 years old, orphan, living alone in this tin shack, with nothing but a leaky roof and a dead mother's memory. And still, he was offering a stranger his only bed. Richard opened his mouth to say something. "Thank you, maybe," or "I'm sorry," or "I don't deserve this." But no words came out, so he just nodded and lowered himself onto the thin mattress and listened to the rain hammering against the tin roof, while an 11-year-old boy settled onto the cold dirt floor without a single word of complaint. The first night was the longest of Richard's life. Rain battered the tin roof without mercy. Water dripped through gaps in the metal, and Isaiah moved quietly around the small space, positioning buckets and containers to catch the leaks. He worked without complaint, without sighing, without even looking at Richard. When he was done, he knelt beside the mattress and examined Richard's leg. The knee was swollen to twice its normal size, the skin purple and angry. "I need to clean this," Isaiah said. "It might get infected if I don't." He pulled a small box from under the wooden crate. Inside were a bottle of rubbing alcohol, some cotton balls, and a roll of bandages, all clearly salvaged from somewhere, the labels faded and peeling. "Where did you get those?" Richard asked. "Found them behind the pharmacy last year. They throw out expired stuff sometimes." Isaiah poured alcohol onto a cotton ball. "This is going to hurt." It did. Richard bit down hard as the boy cleaned the wounds around his knee, dabbing carefully at the cuts and scrapes. Isaiah's hands were steady, his touch surprisingly gentle. "You've done this before," Richard said through clenched teeth. "Used to do it for my mama when she got hurt at work." Isaiah began wrapping the bandage around the knee tight enough to support, but not so tight it cut off circulation. "She said I had good hands for healing." When he was finished, he pulled a piece of bread from a plastic bag hidden under the wooden crate. "Here," he said, offering it to Richard. "It's not much, but it'll help with the hunger." Richard took the bread. It was stale hard at the edges. Yesterday, he would have thrown it away without a second thought. Tonight, his stomach was cramping with hunger, and he ate it in 4 bites. Isaiah watched him eat. Then he lay down on the dirt floor, pulled a thin blanket over his shoulders, and closed his eyes. Richard stared at the boy in the candlelight. "Aren't you going to eat?" "I'm okay. I ate earlier." It was a lie. Richard could hear it in the boy's voice. But he was too tired, too hungry, too broken to push the matter. The second day, the rain continued. Richard woke to gray light filtering through gaps in the tin walls. His leg throbbed, but less than before. The bandage had helped. Isaiah was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor, looking at something in his hands. When he noticed Richard stirring, he quickly tucked it away. "How's the leg?" he asked. "Better. Still hurts." Isaiah nodded and unwrapped the bandage to check the wound. "Swelling's down a little. That's good. I'll clean it again tonight." He grabbed an empty jug and headed for the door. "I'll get water. The public tap is down the road. I'll be back soon." "In this rain?" "Rain or shine, we still need water." He was gone before Richard could respond. 2 hours later, Isaiah returned soaked to the bone, shivering, carrying the heavy jug with both hands. He set it down and immediately knelt beside Richard to check the bandage again. "Where's the food?" Richard asked. It came out harsher than he intended. Isaiah didn't react to the anger. "There isn't any right now. Maybe later." "What do you mean there isn't any? I'm starving." "Mama Rose might bring something this afternoon. She usually does when she can spare it." "Usually you don't know when your next meal is coming." "No, sir. I don't usually know." Richard felt something twist in his chest, but he pushed it away. "Why are you helping me?" he demanded. "You know who I am. You know I'm going to tear down this whole neighborhood, and you're still bringing me water, giving me your food, bandaging my leg. Why?" Isaiah was quiet for a moment. "Because you needed help. That's all that matters right now." "That's all that matters. I'm your enemy. You're a person who's hurt." Isaiah sat down on the floor. "When someone needs help, you help them. You don't ask if they deserve it first." That afternoon, Mama Rose came by with a small container of rice porridge and 2 pieces of bread. Isaiah thanked her, divided the food in half, and gave the larger portion to Richard. Richard watched him. "That's not even. You're bigger than me. You need more." Later, Isaiah heard old Mrs. Patterson coughing through the thin walls. Without a word, he took a portion of his own food, wrapped it in cloth, and carried it next door. Richard watched through a gap in the wall. "Why did you do that? You don't have enough for yourself." "She's sick. She needs it more." "But you haven't eaten anything all day." Isaiah shrugged. "I've gone hungry before. It's not so bad once you get used to it." That night, Isaiah changed Richard's bandage again. The wounds were cleaner now, the swelling continuing to go down. The boy worked in silence, his face serious with concentration. "You're good at this," Richard said quietly. "I just do what needs doing." After he finished, Isaiah took out the photograph again, holding it close to his face in the dim light. His lips moved silently, talking to someone who wasn't there. Richard pretended to be asleep, but he heard every word. "Hi, Mama. I'm okay today. We have a guest. He's hurt pretty bad, but I'm taking care of him. I know he's not a nice man, but you always said everybody deserves kindness. So I'm trying. I'm really trying." A pause. "I miss you." "Every day." The third day, the rain began to ease. Richard woke at dawn to find Isaiah already gone. He pulled himself up and limped to the door, pushing aside the plywood, just in time to see the boy disappearing down the muddy road with a plastic bag over his shoulder. Going to collect cans and bottles, even now, even after 2 days of barely eating. When Isaiah returned hours later, he checked Richard's leg first thing. The swelling had gone down significantly. The cuts were scabbing over cleanly. "Looking better," Isaiah said. "Another day or 2 and you should be able to walk on it properly." Mama Rose had brought more food while Isaiah was out. Beans and rice and cornbread, a proper meal. Isaiah divided it carefully and looked toward Mrs. Patterson's house. "Don't," Richard said quietly. Isaiah looked at him. "Don't give away your food. Not today. You need to eat." "But Mrs. Patterson—" "I'll give her mine. You eat." Isaiah stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. That night, they sat in darkness. The candle had burned down to nothing. No power, no light, just the sound of distant rain and their own breathing. "Can I ask you something?" Richard broke the silence. "Yes, sir." "What do you want if you could have anything in the world?" Isaiah didn't hesitate. "I want to go to school." "You don't go to school." "No, sir. Costs money for supplies, clothes, books. I taught myself to read from books people throw away. But I want real school. Teachers, classmates, homework. All of it." Richard thought about his own education, private tutors, the best universities. He had never once considered that school was something a child might dream about. "What about you?" Isaiah asked. "What about me? You have everything. Money, houses, cars. What do you wish for?" The question hit Richard like a punch. What did he wish for 52 years of accumulating wealth, and what did he actually want? He opened his mouth to answer. Nothing came out. I don't know, he finally admitted. I honestly don't know. They sat in silence after that, but something had shifted between them. On the morning of the fourth day, the sun came out. Richard walked outside and saw the roads draining the mud beginning to dry. His leg was stiff but functional thanks to 3 days of careful bandaging. He could leave now, return to his penthouse, his billions, his empty life. Isaiah appeared beside him. I can walk you to the main road. You can catch a taxi from there. Richard looked down at the boy, thin, hungry, exhausted. This child had given him everything and asked for nothing in return. I'll come back, Richard said. I owe you. Isaiah shook his head. You don't owe me anything. I didn't help you to get paid back. Then why did you do all this? The boy looked up at him with those steady eyes. Because that's just what you do. Richard nodded slowly. He reached out and put his hand on Isaiah's shoulder just for a moment. Then he turned and began walking toward the main road. He looked back once. Isaiah was standing in front of his tin shack, small and alone, watching him go. And for the first time in his life, Richard looked at that shack and didn't see something to be demolished. He saw a home. The taxi dropped Richard at his penthouse building just before noon. Victoria Reynolds, his assistant, was waiting in the lobby. Her face went white when she saw him. Mr. Langston, oh my God, what happened? You disappeared for 4 days. We were about to file a missing persons report. Richard walked past her toward the private elevator. I'm fine. I was delayed. Delayed, sir. You look like you were in a car accident. Your leg, your face. I said I'm fine. The elevator doors opened and he stepped inside. I need you to do something for me. The men who attacked me, I want them found and arrested. I have descriptions. Make sure the police handle it personally. Victoria nodded quickly, tapping notes into her phone. Of course, sir. What else? Nothing else. For now. He rode up to his penthouse alone. The doors opened onto 9,000 square feet of marble and glass and emptiness. He walked to the bathroom, stripped off his ruined clothes, and stood under the shower for a long time. The hot water felt good on his aching muscles. The pressure soothed his injured leg. He dried off with towels that cost more than Isaiah's entire shack, then dressed in fresh clothes that were worth more than everything the boy owned. Then he walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows and looked down at Atlanta, his city, his buildings, his empire. But all he could see was a tin roof, leaking in the rain, a boy giving away his only food, a child talking to a photograph of his dead mother. Victoria's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Langston, the board is requesting an update on the Grove Hills project. They want to know if we're proceeding with the demolition timeline. Richard was silent for a long moment. Tell them the project is on hold. Indefinitely. Sir, you heard me. On hold. I need time to think. A pause. Yes, sir. I'll let them know. The days that followed were strange. Richard went to meetings, signed documents, made decisions worth millions of dollars. But his mind kept drifting back to Grove Hills, to a small boy with nothing who gave everything. He couldn't stop thinking about the bread Isaiah had given him, stale and hard. The water the boy had carried half a mile in the pouring rain. The bed he had surrendered without being asked. And that question, the one Richard couldn't answer, what do you wish for? 3 days after his return, Richard made a decision. He called his driver, loaded his car with supplies, food, medicine, blankets, cash, and drove to Grove Hills himself. The roads were dry, now the flooding just a memory. He found his way to Isaiah's tin shack without difficulty. But when he knocked on the plywood door, no one answered. He knocked again, harder. Isaiah, it's me. It's Langston. Nothing. A voice behind him made him turn. Mama Rose was hurrying toward him, her face creased with worry. Mr. Langston, you came back. Where's Isaiah? The old woman's expression told him everything before she spoke a word. The hospital. They took him yesterday. Richard's stomach dropped. Hospital, what happened? He collapsed, right there in the street. Mama Rose wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Doctors say it's severe malnutrition and pneumonia. They said he hadn't eaten properly in days, maybe longer. Days. The days Richard had been there. The days Isaiah had given him all the food. Which hospital? Grady Memorial. But Mr. Langston, he doesn't have insurance. They'll only keep him so long before... Richard was already running to his car. He drove through red lights, through stop signs, through every traffic law he had ever followed. When he reached the hospital, he left his car in a loading zone and burst through the emergency room doors. Isaiah Williams, he told the woman at the front desk. I need to see him now. Are you family? Richard hesitated. I'm paying his bills, all of them, whatever he needs. Just tell me where he is." 5 minutes later, he was standing outside a room in the pediatric ward. Through the window, he could see Isaiah lying in a hospital bed, thin and pale, an IV line running into his arm. The boy looked even smaller than Richard remembered. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. Isaiah's eyes fluttered open. When he saw Richard, a weak smile crossed his face. "You came back." Richard pulled a chair to the bedside and sat down heavily. "Why didn't you tell me all those days you were starving? You gave me everything you had." "You were hurt," Isaiah said simply. "You needed it more." "No," Richard's voice cracked. "No, I didn't. I didn't need it more. I just took it because I was hungry and selfish, and I didn't even think about—" He couldn't finish. His throat was closing up. "It's okay," Isaiah said. "I wanted to help. That's what Mama taught me." Richard looked at this boy, this child who had nearly died to save a man who was going to destroy his home, and felt something break inside his chest. "The nurse mentioned you had a photograph with you when you came in," Richard said quietly. "The only thing you brought." Isaiah nodded. "My mama's picture. They put it in the drawer there." Richard reached over and opened the bedside drawer. Inside was a worn photograph, its edges soft from years of handling. He picked it up carefully. A young black woman smiled at the camera. She was standing in front of a construction site, her belly round with pregnancy, her face glowing with happiness. She looked maybe 20 years old, beautiful and full of hope. Richard's hands began to shake. He knew that face. He knew that smile. He knew that construction site. 12 years ago, Atlanta. He had been 40 years old, already wealthy, already powerful. And there had been a woman, a worker at one of his construction projects, young, beautiful kind. He had fallen for her in a way he had never fallen for anyone before. Her name was Maria Williams. She had gotten pregnant. Richard had been terrified. His family had been furious. A black woman from nothing carrying a Langston child, unacceptable, embarrassing, wrong. So Richard had done what his family told him to do. He had given Maria money and told her to take care of it. He had cut off all contact. He had told himself she would get an abortion and move on with her life, and he would never have to think about it again. He had never checked, never followed up, never asked what happened to Maria Williams or the child she might have had. And now, 12 years later, he was holding that woman's photograph and looking at her son. His son. Richard turned the picture over. On the back, in faded handwriting, were the words, "For my baby. Mommy loves you forever. Maria." The room spun. Richard gripped the edge of the bed to steady himself. "Mister," Isaiah's voice was worried. "Are you okay? You look sick." Richard looked up at the boy. Those eyes, that face. How had he not seen it before? The shape of the jaw, the way his brow furrowed when he was thinking. "You knew my mama?" Isaiah asked. "From the picture. Did you know her?" Richard opened his mouth. No words came out. He tried again. "Isaiah," his voice was barely a whisper. "Your mother, Maria. She and I. We—" He couldn't say it. The words wouldn't come. Isaiah watched him confused. "What is it? What's wrong?" Richard looked at this child, this boy who had saved his life, who had given him food and shelter and kindness when he had nothing, who had nearly died because of that kindness. His son, the son he never knew existed, the son he had thrown away like garbage before he was even born. And for the first time in more than 30 years, Richard Langston began to cry. Not quiet tears, not dignified weeping. He sobbed like a child, his whole body shaking, the photograph clutched in his trembling hands. Isaiah stared at him, bewildered. Mister, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" Richard couldn't answer. He could only look at his son through blurred eyes and weep for everything he had lost, everything he had thrown away, everything he had done wrong. The boy he had abandoned was lying in a hospital bed because he had given his last food to save a stranger. That stranger was his father. Richard sat beside Isaiah's hospital bed for 3 days. He paid for a private room, the best doctors, round-the-clock nurses. He barely slept, barely ate. Every time Isaiah opened his eyes, Richard was there. And every time the boy would smile weakly and say, "You're still here." "I'm not going anywhere," Richard would reply. And he meant it. On the 4th day, Isaiah was strong enough to sit up. The color had returned to his cheeks. The doctor said he would make a full recovery. Richard knew it was time. He had rehearsed the words 100 times in his head. He had started to speak and stopped himself a dozen times. Every time he looked at Isaiah, He felt the confession rising in his throat, and every time fear pushed it back down. What if the boy hated him? What if this destroyed everything? But he couldn't keep lying. Not anymore. "Isaiah," Richard said, his voice unsteady, "there's something I need to tell you." The boy looked at him with those calm, trusting eyes. "What is it?" Richard opened his mouth, closed it. His hands were shaking. He gripped the edge of the bed to steady himself. "It's about your mother, about Maria, and about—" He swallowed hard. "About me." Isaiah's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You knew her. I could tell from how you looked at the picture." "Yes, I knew her." Richard stared at his hands. He couldn't look at the boy. 12 years ago, she worked at one of my construction sites. We met there. We fell in love." He paused, waiting for Isaiah to say something. The boy remained silent. "She got pregnant. With you." Richard's voice cracked. "I was happy at first. I wanted to marry her. I wanted to be a father." "What happened?" The question was soft, without accusation. Somehow, that made it worse. "My family happened." Richard finally looked up. "They said she wasn't good enough. Wrong background. Wrong color. They threatened to cut me off, disown me, destroy everything I had built." He took a shaky breath. "So I did what they wanted. I gave her money and told her to take care of it. I disappeared from her life. I never looked back. I never checked to see what happened." Isaiah's face was still unreadable. He stared at Richard for a long moment, then down at his own hands, then at the photograph of his mother on the bedside table. "So you're—" The boy's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm your father." The words came out broken ugly. "I'm the man who abandoned you before you were even born. I'm the reason your mother raised you alone. I'm the reason she had no one to help her when she got sick." Silence filled the room. Richard could hear his own heartbeat, loud and frantic. When Isaiah finally spoke, his voice was trembling. "Mama waited for you. Did you know that?" Richard shook his head. "She never said your name, but she talked about you sometimes. She said you were busy, important, that one day you might come back." A tear slid down Isaiah's cheek. "She believed it. Until the day she died, she believed you would come." "Isaiah, she got sick." The boy's voice was rising now, the words tumbling out faster. "She coughed so bad she couldn't breathe. I was 8 years old, and I ran everywhere trying to find help. I begged the pharmacy for medicine. I got down on my knees in front of strangers, asking for money." He was crying now, really crying, the tears streaming down his face. Nobody helped, not one person. "And she died. She died holding my hand, telling me she loved me, telling me to be good." Richard felt his own tears falling. "I'm sorry. God, Isaiah, I'm so sorry. She died because she couldn't afford $50 for medicine." Isaiah's voice broke. $50. And you had everything. You had millions, billions. You lived in a tower in the sky, while my mama died on a rotting mattress because she couldn't afford $50. I know. Why?" The word came out as a sob. "Why did you leave her? She loved you. She loved you so much. Why wasn't that enough?" Richard slid off his chair onto his knees beside the bed. He was crying openly now, something he hadn't done in decades. "Because I was a coward," he said. "Because I was weak and selfish, and I cared more about money and status than about the woman I loved and the child she was carrying. Because I was everything your mother wasn't, small and scared and worthless." Isaiah stared at him through his tears. "I don't have an excuse," Richard continued. "There is no excuse. I chose wrong. I chose the easy path, the coward's path, and your mother paid the price. You paid the price. For 12 years you paid for my weakness." He reached out and took Isaiah's hand. The boy flinched but didn't pull away. "I can never make up for what I did. I can never bring her back. I can never give you the childhood you deserved, but I'm asking you not for forgiveness, because I don't deserve that. I'm asking for a chance. Just a chance to try to be something to you. Anything." The door opened softly. Mama Rose stood in the doorway, her face wet with tears. She had heard everything. She walked to Isaiah's bedside and sat down, taking his other hand in hers. "Baby, I know you're hurting. Lord knows you have every right to be angry." Isaiah looked at her, his face twisted with pain and confusion. "But I want you to think about something," she continued gently. "What would your mama want you to do right now?" "I don't know," Isaiah whispered. "Yes, you do. Deep down, you know." The boy was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was small. She would say that holding on to hate only hurts the one doing the hating." Mama Rose nodded. "And what else?" She would say, "Everyone deserves a second chance, even when they don't deserve it." "That's right." Mama Rose squeezed his hand. "Your mama was the best person I ever knew, and she raised you to be just like her." Isaiah turned to Richard, still kneeling on the floor, still crying. This man who had abandoned him. This man who had let his mother die alone. This man who had everything and gave nothing. This man who is now on his knees begging for a chance. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Isaiah said quietly. "I don't know if I can ever call you my father." Richard nodded, accepting it. "But—" Isaiah took a shaky breath. "Mama loved you. Even after everything, she loved you. And she would want me to give you a chance." He looked at Richard with eyes that held 1,000 emotions. "So I will, not because you deserve it, because she would have wanted it." Richard's whole body shook with sobs. He rose from his knees and hesitantly reached toward Isaiah. The boy didn't move away. For the first time in 12 years, Richard Langston held his son. Isaiah didn't hug back. His body stayed stiff, uncertain. But he didn't push away either. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even acceptance. It was something smaller, more fragile. It was a beginning. 2 weeks later, Isaiah was discharged from the hospital. Richard pulled his car up to the entrance, ready to drive his son to the penthouse. New bedroom, new clothes, new life. Everything a boy could want. But Isaiah shook his head. "I want to go home." Richard frowned. "I thought we could stay at my place. It's more comfortable, and you need rest. Grove Hills is my home." Isaiah's voice was quiet but firm. "That's where Mama is buried. That's where the people who raised me live. I'm not leaving them." Richard wanted to argue. The penthouse had everything: clean water, air conditioning, soft beds, more food than they could ever eat. Grove Hills had none of those things. But then he looked at his son's face and saw something he recognized. Stubbornness. The same stubbornness Maria had. "Okay," he said simply. "Grove Hills it is." He drove Isaiah back to the tin shack that had somehow become more real to him than his $35 million penthouse. And when they arrived, Mama Rose was waiting outside along with a small crowd of neighbors. Even Mr. Johnson was there, standing at the back, his arms crossed. "Welcome home, baby," Mama Rose said, hugging Isaiah tight. She glanced at Richard over the boy's shoulder, her expression unreadable. That night, Richard sat in his car outside Isaiah's shack, unable to leave. He watched the candlelight flicker through the gaps in the tin walls. He thought about his penthouse, empty and cold, waiting for him. Then he made a decision. The next morning, Victoria called. "Sir, the board is demanding an answer on the Grove Hills project. They've given you a deadline end of this week. Cancel it." "Sir." "The project. Cancel it. All of it. No demolition. No development. Grove Hills stays exactly as it is." A long pause. "Mr. Langston, that's a $2 billion project. The investors will." "I don't care about the investors. Cancel it." He hung up before she could respond. Over the following weeks, Richard did something no one expected. Instead of bulldozing Grove Hills, he began rebuilding it. Not with luxury condos or shopping centers, with proper houses, sturdy walls, solid roofs, running water, electricity. Things the residents had never had. The first time construction crews arrived, the neighborhood watched with suspicion. Mr. Johnson stood in front of his trailer with a baseball bat. "What's your game, Langston?" he demanded. "You think you can buy us off, make us grateful before you stab us in the back?" Richard walked toward him, alone, hands in his pockets. "No game, no conditions. I'm just building houses." "Why, what do you want?" "I want to pay a debt." Richard met the old man's eyes. "To Isaiah, to Maria, to everyone I've hurt without even knowing their names. I don't need charity from some rich man who destroyed my life." "It's not charity, it's work." Richard gestured to the construction crew. "I need foremen, people who know this neighborhood, who can manage crews and make sure things get done right. You interested?" Mr. Johnson stared at him. "You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a chance to rebuild your own community, with your own hands, on my dime." The old man was silent for a long moment. Then he lowered the baseball bat. "I still don't like you," he said. "I wouldn't expect you to. But I'll take the job. For the neighborhood, not for you. That's all I'm asking." Slowly, things began to change. Walls went up. Roofs were fixed. For the first time in decades, Grove Hills had streetlights that actually worked. One evening, Richard found Isaiah sitting on the steps of his new house, a real house now, with proper walls and windows. The boy was staring at the sky. "What are you thinking about?" Richard asked, sitting beside him. "Mama would have liked this." Isaiah's voice was soft. "A real house, a real bed. She always said someday things would get better." I wish I could have given it to her. Isaiah nodded slowly. Me too. They sat in silence for a while. Then Richard spoke. I want you to come live with me. Isaiah turned to look at him. Not in the penthouse. I'm selling that. But somewhere close. A real house where we can be a family. The boy shook his head. I can't leave Grove Hills. Isaiah. These people raised me. When Mama died, Mama Rose fed me. Mr. Johnson gave me clothes when mine got too small. Mrs. Patterson taught me to read. They had nothing, but they gave me everything. Isaiah's voice was steady. I can't just leave them because something better came along. Richard felt his heart sink. He understood, but it still hurt. Then I'll stay too. Isaiah looked at him sharply. What? If you won't leave Grove Hills, then I'll stay in Grove Hills, with you. You can't be serious. You're a billionaire. You have a company buildings business. I have a son. Richard's voice was firm. That matters more than any of it. He pulled out his phone and dialed Victoria. Sell the penthouse. Use the money to finish the Grove Hills renovation project. And find me a house here. Something small, close to my son. Victoria's voice was incredulous. Sir, you can't possibly mean... I've never meant anything more in my life. He hung up and looked at Isaiah. The boy was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You would really do that? Isaiah asked quietly. Give up everything to live here. That penthouse was never home. It was just a place I slept. Richard put his hand on his son's shoulder. Home is where your family is. And my family is here. For the first time since the hospital, Isaiah smiled. A small smile, uncertain and fragile, but real. That night they ate dinner together at Mama Rose's table. Beans and rice and cornbread. Simple food shared with neighbors. Richard looked around at the faces surrounding him. People who had hated him just weeks ago. People he had planned to make homeless. Now they were passing him bread, asking about his day, treating him like one of their own. 1 year later, Grove Hills was unrecognizable. The tin shacks were gone, replaced by modest but sturdy houses with real foundations and proper roofs. Streetlights lined the newly paved roads. A small medical clinic stood where an abandoned lot used to be staffed by a nurse practitioner who saw patients for free. And at the heart of the neighborhood, under the old oak tree where Maria Williams was buried, a new headstone rose from the ground, marble with her name carved deep into the stone. Fresh flowers surrounded it, replaced every week by people who had known her, loved her, been touched by her kindness. Today the oak tree was surrounded by people, dozens of them, reporters with cameras, residents in their Sunday best children running between the legs of adults. A small stage had been set up with a banner that read, Maria Williams Foundation for the Forgotten Children. Richard stood at the side of the stage watching the crowd gather. Victoria appeared beside him, tablet in hand. The foundation is officially registered, she said. National reach. We've already received applications from over 300 children in the first week alone. Richard nodded. Good. Accept all of them. Sir, the budget. I'll sell another building. Whatever it takes. Victoria smiled slightly. You really have changed, Mr. Langston. No. Richard watched Isaiah walking through the crowd, shaking hands with neighbors, laughing with other children. I just finally figured out what matters. The ceremony began. Mama Rose said a prayer. Mr. Johnson, now the official foreman of the Grove Hills renovation project, gave a short speech about community and perseverance. The residents applauded. Then it was Isaiah's turn. The boy walked to the microphone slowly, a piece of paper clutched in his hands. He was 12 now, a little taller, a little healthier, but still with those same serious eyes. My name is Isaiah Williams. He began, his voice shaking slightly. Most of you know me. You knew my mama, too. He looked down at his paper, then set it aside. Mama died 3 years ago. She died because we couldn't afford $50 for medicine. That's it. $50. That was the price of her life. The crowd was silent. She wasn't famous. She wasn't rich. She didn't have power or influence or any of the things the world says matter. But she had something better. She had love, and she gave it to everyone she met. Isaiah's voice grew steadier as he spoke. She taught me that being poor in money doesn't mean being poor in character. She taught me to help people even when it's hard, even when they don't deserve it, even when you have nothing left to give. He looked directly at Richard, who was wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I didn't save my father's life because I'm special. I did it because that's what Mama taught me to do. And now, because of her lessons, hundreds of kids like me are going to get to go to school. They're going to get books and uniforms and a chance at something better. Isaiah turned to face the headstone behind him. Mama, I hope you can see this. I hope you know that people remember you now, that your name means something, that the love you gave me is spreading to kids all over the country who need it just like I did." His voice broke slightly. "I miss you every day, but I'm trying to make you proud. I'm trying to be the person you taught me to be." He stepped back from the microphone. The applause started slowly, then built until it filled the entire neighborhood. Mama Rose was crying. Mr. Johnson was wiping his eyes roughly, pretending he had something in them. Richard walked to his son and pulled him into a hug. This time, Isaiah hugged back. 1 week later, Isaiah started school. He woke up at 5 in the morning, unable to sleep. Richard found him in the kitchen, already dressed in his new uniform, staring at himself in the small mirror by the door. "You look good," Richard said. "I look weird." Isaiah tugged at his collar. "I've never worn clothes this nice before." "You'll get used to it." Richard made breakfast scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy, but warm and filling. They ate together at the small table in their modest house, a house that was smaller than Richard's old penthouse bathroom. It was the best home he had ever had. "You ready?" Richard asked. Isaiah nodded, but his hands were trembling slightly. "What if the other kids don't like me? What if I'm too far behind? What if—" "Hey." Richard knelt down to look his son in the eye. "You taught yourself to read from books people threw away. You survived alone for 3 years. You saved the life of a man who didn't deserve saving. You can handle 6th grade. Isaiah smiled, small but genuine. "Yeah, I guess I can." They walked to school together. Richard carried Isaiah's backpack until they reached the gate, then handed it over. "Have a good day," Richard said. "I'll be here when you get out." Isaiah took the backpack, then paused. "Dad." It was the first time he had used that word. Richard's heart stopped. "Thank you. For staying. For everything." Richard pulled him into a quick hug. "Thank your mother. She's the one who made you who you are. I'm just trying to catch up." Isaiah smiled, then turned and walked through the school gates. Richard watched until he disappeared inside, then stood there for a while longer, just looking at the building where his son would learn and grow and become something incredible. That evening, they visited Maria's grave together. Isaiah placed fresh flowers at the base of the headstone. "Hi, Mama. I started school today. It was scary at first, but I made a friend. His name is Marcus. You would like him." Richard stood beside his son, his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Maria," he said quietly, "I'm sorry it took me so long to find my way back. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me, but I promise you I will spend the rest of my life taking care of our son. He will never be alone again." Isaiah leaned into his father's side. Richard put his arm around him. They stood there as the sun set, father and son watching the sky turn gold and pink above the neighborhood they now called home. On the walk back, Isaiah ran ahead, chasing a stray dog that had become the neighborhood mascot. Richard watched him go, this boy who had nothing and gave everything who had saved him in ways he was still discovering. "Dad," Isaiah called back, "hurry up. Mama Rose is making dinner tonight." Richard smiled and quickened his pace. A year ago, he had owned a third of Atlanta. He had lived in a penthouse worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. He had everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. Now he lived in a small house in a neighborhood most people had never heard of. He ate dinner with his neighbors. He walked his son to school every morning. And for the first time in 52 years, Richard Langston was happy, truly, completely happy. This story leaves us with a quiet but powerful reminder that kindness, integrity, and compassion can exist even in the harshest circumstances. It shows us that true strength is not found in power, wealth, or control, but in the choices we make when no one is watching, especially when helping someone costs us something. Sometimes the smallest acts of goodness can change lives in ways we never expect. And sometimes the people with the least to give are the ones who give the most. Now we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from today, and what part of this story stayed with you the longest? If stories like this bring you a sense of hope or remind you of the good that still exists in the world, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing meaningful stories that carry warmth, humanity, and positive messages to more people. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening.